Hello, everyone, and welcome back to VO in Stereo. As always, I'm your host, Jared Breshers, along with
Stephen Coghill.
today. Ooh, it's always my special pleasure, but I like this guy. He's smooth. He's got a sexy voice. Please welcome voice actor, storyteller, narrator, and all-around creative human, Dennis Kleinman.
Woo!
Not to mention he's got gorgeous hair.
He really does.
Want some?
We would. Are you kidding? Look at this. It's like,
A bit follically challenged at the moment.
Yeah.
psychic women come to my house and look at the top of my head to tell the future. It's horrible.
What do they think? It's a crystal ball or something?
I love gypsies. Welcome. Thank you so much for carving out some time for us. As always, I'm going to let Stephen kick it off with a few questions. Again, thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to learning more about Mr. Kleinman.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me. I really do appreciate it, and it's so great to see you guys again.
Oh, it's so good to see you again. It's been a while.
It'd be better to see you in person, but that'll come. I think the lights.
You know me. I'm a hugger.
Yep, we were all supposed to be together at the VO Atlanta thing, and
Right.
Yep. So now here we are on a Zoom session.
Bum, bum, bum.
It's almost as good.
People are gonna. I wonder next year how many people are going to be Zooming as opposed to trying to catch up on real FaceTime.
Yeah.
There's a few people I wouldn't mind not having contact after this is over with.
Good thing we all have
The list
choices.
is running below. Just kidding.
Right?
Yeah.
Like a little ticker. All right, Stephen, we'll kick us off there, buddy.
Dennis, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Thanks. My question to you, sir, is where were you born? Where were you conceived?
Cape Town, South Africa.
South Africa. Whereabouts?
Cape Town, right at the bottom of the continent. I would certainly say, and I think a lot of people will agree, it's one of the most beautiful cities, I think, in the world. I mean, it's just magnificent. I don't know if you guys have seen pictures, but you have a flat top mountain called Table Mountain, and the city nestles below and around it, and incredible beaches. And being that, the interesting thing about Cape Town, very quickly, is that being that it's at the end of, at the tip of the continent, the Atlantic Ocean and the Indian Ocean meet at Cape Point.
Huh.
You actually can see a line of foam going out as the two currents kind of come together.
That's
quite
amazing.
I've seen a picture of that, and that is very peculiar, and it looks amazing when you see it too.
Well, what was really fun is that the Indian Ocean is very warm. The Atlantic Ocean in that part of the world is extremely cold. There's a very cold current that comes down the west coast of Africa. So as in my youth, what we'd do is we'd go to the Indian Ocean side in the morning. The wind would pick up usually during the middle of the day, and then we'd go to the Atlantic side for the afternoon and evening into little coves where it was very secluded and you wouldn't get any wind, very warm. And it was a great place to grow up in, I must say, aside from all the political stuff. So,
No, absolutely.
That sounds amazing. 2 oceans, one in one day.
yeah, exactly.
It's not as impressive as George driving like, oh, we're in between 2 state lines, honey. Not as impressive.
Well, when I first got to LA, and I'd go up to Big Bear Mountain, go skiing till about 3 in the afternoon, get back for sunset at the beach.
Wow, yeah, that must be wild.
Yeah,
Sounds like a great time.
I try and have a good time whenever I can.
I imagine you can, and I imagine you do. And you grew up there, and did you have siblings?
Yes, I have one brother.
Mhm.
And I grew up in a very creative environment. My mother was an abstract artist. And so I was, involved in the artistic world and with parties and people coming and going. And it was really, really wonderful. It was a great education. And I also was very close with an aunt of mine who was married to my dad's brother. And they lived in London. And so as kids, we would go basically every year since we were really young and spend time there. And I think that has actually impacted my accent somewhat, because my accent is kind of a blend of British and South African. I'm not very typically South African. I can be if I need to be. but so I've got this sort of like what I would call a sort of an indistinguishable accent. It's very globalized and international. A lot of people think I'm from the UK, but I'm not. So,
Yeah.
but
The vocal chameleon.
Yeah. And that's interesting because the demo that you released recently, I heard both. I heard the British accent and I heard your South African accent. So that was
right,
interesting.
right.
Very
And
cool.
and was your sibling? Was he? You said you had a brother, right?
Yes, I have a brother. He
And
actually lives here in LA as well.
was,
We
was he
all that.
creative as well?
He's more he's creative, but more in software and that kind of thing. So he had a very successful company that he sold, and he's done very well with it. And but he's more sort of the what would you say, more the right brain, I guess.
Mhm.
Gotcha.
So,
I'm always using the wrong brain.
I know, right?
I think
Totally
it's
get that part.
left. What's the creative side again?
I believe you're right. The left side is the creative brain, I believe.
I did an audiobook about the left and the right hemisphere, and I've forgotten a lot of the content.
Are you right-handed or left-handed?
I'm right-handed.
Okay. Jared, are you right-handed or left-handed?
I'm ambidextrous most things,
But you're
but
right
I'm
with the,
predominantly right-handed.
right-handed. Okay.
Predominantly.
Interesting. And so you went to you went to school? Did you finish school in South
Yeah.
Africa?
I'll tell you very briefly. When I grew up, it was in the middle of the apartheid years, and for every young white male, it was mandatory to go into the army. You had to do at least a year in the army, and typically you'd go right after you finish high school. But you could also get what they called a deferment and go to college first, and then do your military service afterwards. And obviously, I was very fortunate. I grew up in a very liberal, open-minded household. My dad was one of the founding members of one of the major opposition parties in South Africa in the early 60s. And I knew from a very early age that I was not going to support the apartheid regime by living there for the rest of my life. So what I did is I went to university right after high school, and I got a degree in psychology and sociology. And as soon as I finished university, I actually left the country. And then I wrote to the authorities once I got here and said I was studying overseas. And, they got the standard letter: when you come back, you have to do your military service. Well, that's water under the bridge now. So, yeah. But another interesting fact about my youth, which you guys might not know, is that South Africa did not get television until 1975.
Wow.
I went through my whole youth and high school years without television.
You just said
And radio was our main form of entertainment.
That was my next question.
I'm a step ahead of you,
Yeah,
Steve.
so you had something. See, did you have like record collection growing up and all that kind of stuff?
Oh, yeah. Record collections would go to the library. I'd get records from the library, did a lot of reading. I was an avid reader as a kid. And, when you think about the concept of growing up without television, when I look back on it now, I really am extremely blessed that I had that opportunity, because it forces you to really sort of to grow your own imagination. And, in those days, there was no such thing as video games and everything. We played outside with toys and got dirty, and it was just it was a healthy way to grow up.
Use that thing called the imagination.
Yeah.
Gee, imagine using that in your future endeavors.
Yes. So, the love of radio was obviously something that really sort of captured me. And as a kid, I would do, I had the ability as a kid to do different accents and voices. And so it all started to sort of come together then, and I'd record little radio plays and all sorts of things like that.
That's awesome. And did you have like somebody that influenced you, or I know you didn't have TV shows that influenced you, but did you have somebody you looked up to, or? somebody that
Well,
might.
you know, there were personalities of that time at that time, radio personalities, and they were the stars. You know, you'd clamor to find a photograph of them to see what they looked like
The
because you
disc jockeys.
and it was I guess an age of innocence almost because we had so little that we could sort of rely on in terms of finding out information. News in South Africa was pretty much censored. I mean, it was very interesting because when we used to travel to London, I'd learned so much more about what was going on in South Africa than when I was there.
Wow.
You know, so you'd hear things that were happening, and obviously not great things that were happening, but it was quite interesting learning more about the place you lived in from outside than from inside.
That's true.
It's amazing how the governments and the powers that be and the higher ups will use manipulation of media in all shapes and forms is to either try to educate you their way or try to,
Well, we were basically denied television because the government wanted to maintain as little media as they needed to. So, in fact, when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, South Africa was one of the only countries worldwide that did not have television coverage, and there was a lot of pressure to get it, and that was one of the influences to finally bring us into the new age.
Right.
well, I am very glad for the way things have turned out.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
And where did you go from South Africa? You moved. Where did you move?
I actually moved. I moved to Los Angeles. My brother had traveled to LA a year before, and he was pretty young. He met someone who is still his wife. He married very young, and he fell in love and decided to. We were originally going to go to the UK, obviously, with having family there, but there were a lot of issues in terms of immigration and things like that. So we ended up coming here. My parents came here as well, but at different times. We all ended up here. So we were very lucky with many immigrants. You know, you don't always have that family unit intact. And so it was great. And it's very interesting now. I mean, I've got two children. I have two granddaughters. And you sort of think about your whole journey, and you look back and realize, you know, how wonderful it is to have the opportunity to build a life in another country. But the one difference about that is that I will always be an immigrant. You know, that doesn't change. I'm a naturalized American. I was naturalized in 1987, but I'm always going to be an immigrant in some sense of the word. But this country is made up of immigrants, and so, you know,
But to say it's not necessarily a bad thing.
And what age were you when you moved to LA?
I was 21.
Wow,
Yeah, yeah,
fresh face.
just starting out. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And what
So
you
when I got here, I wanted to get into the entertainment industry, you know, right away, and you know, being impressionable in those days, parents saying to you, you know, you don't want that kind of life. It's so unstable. Da 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 da. Try and find something that has more of a foundation. I actually ended up getting involved in business using my psychology and sociology degree to, you know, get into sales and things like that. And I
Sales
actually
is a big part of manipulation.
taking
Manipulation is a
advantage of
huge part of sales.
selling all the time. I mean, if you think about it, it's just
Oh,
how.
yeah. Everything's a script.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's true.
So I got actually involved in the construction industry, a specific part of it, doing prefabricated concrete wall products,
Fun.
and which was very big in South Africa. And so I realized there was an opportunity. People were playing around with it here, but I got involved, and I worked in that industry for quite a while, but always had such a strong desire to be in the creative zone. And so I started taking acting classes and voice classes, and ultimately I transitioned full time about 5 years ago into, you know, really, I would say no, really from about 2013, a little bit more than that, when I started doing audiobooks, and I just realized it was getting the opportunity also, I think, for a foreign accent has improved and increased dramatically since like the 80s, 90s. And now, we're in such a global community that I don't think accents really will preclude one from doing work in various parts of the world.
That's true.
So my accent is I think is attractive to the American ear, and it's just going great. I mean, I'm just loving it, and I work in all genres of voiceover as well.
I'm sorry, what were you saying? I was lost in the tone and thickness of your velvety voice. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Kleinman.
It's so true.
No, it's effortless. And what's funny is when it's effortless, you can tell when it's effortless. And for you, it's a part of who you are. And it's kind of like it reminded me of you said, I'll always be an immigrant. That just makes me think of that you carry things with you emotionally as well, that and memories and things that make you who you are. And I'm sure you've seen, I can't even imagine, but it kind of develops that tone, that voice, being able to go in and out of different situations without having to think too much about it, because you've lived situations like that. So that's kind of what I took from that.
Oh, great. And the other thing about that is that I was very fortunate. I've done an extensive amount of traveling, obviously, working for work, for pleasure. And so I feel that I bring that experience also to my work. When I'm speaking about something in India, I've been to India a few times. I know what I'm talking about. So I think it does, as much as you can see pictures, when you can smell the air and see the people and really just get the atmosphere of wherever you are. I think, all these things sort of get downloaded into the memory banks, and you have access to them when you need them, down the road. So I think that is really, it's really impacted my work a lot.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And do you prefer to do audiobooks, or are you trying to branch out into other things? Or
I really do everything. I mean, I do some commercials. I do quite a lot of corporate work. I do documentaries. I'm hoping to increase that side of my business a lot in this coming year, because I absolutely love narration. And I do a lot of audiobooks. I have over 70 audiobooks right now, out there. What I like about it is audiobooks give me a feeling of being grounded. It creates a foundation for me. So when I look at my work, I do work, for example, for Sotheby's. They have a whole series called Anatomy of an Artwork that they use when they're doing their auctioning. And I've done tons of those. So what I like is I like to look at my day and say, it's almost like a pie chart, or like a pizza with slices. Some are thin, some are bigger. But having audiobooks gives me that sense of I'm always working. I always have something that I've got to do. And it does keep me grounded. And so I like the variation and the variety. I do video games as well. And I've recently, this past year, I've done a lot of dubbing. I've dubbed a lot of foreign films, and I do that in American, actually. Yeah. And I've also recently gotten involved in audio description, which is really, really great work. What I really love about that is that it forces you you have to be so sharp. You cannot lose concentration for a second. And I like that. I find it almost like brain food for myself.
Oh, I'm out.
And that's been our show.
Their brain don't work all good all time.
Really?
You don't say. That's awesome. That's very cool.
That is really cool.
So I like the blend of all the different types.
Variety is the spice of life.
Exactly.
I think Dos Equis owes you money. You might be the most interesting man in the world.
It's possible.
They can hire me, and I'll gladly.
You heard it here, Dos Equis.
Up.
I don't know what the hell you're doing. Get off your butts.
Listen up, this man. You need him.
You need him now.
Interesting man in the world.
There you
So
go.
let me ask you a question. You travel a lot, so you find yourself in different situations. I'm sure you enjoy cultures and different foods and stuff. But when you're missing home, when you're missing what means home to you, what is like the food or drink you can get no matter where you're at that just kind of makes you settles you down, makes you not miss home so much. Your comfort food.
Um, my comfort food. Well, I'm a huge sushi fan. So if I can have sushi anywhere, that's
Good to
my
go.
I would say is my comfort food. Um, and yeah, I absolutely love that. And there's a sushi place that I go to here in LA that's a little off the beaten track, but I maintain it's the best place in the world. And I'm not going to say the name because then there are going to be tons of people that are going to go there and I won't get a table.
Don't give away your
It's
top
smart.
secret, man. Keep
It's
that
very
one in your
smart.
pocket. Now, what about drink?
I like scotch.
Scotch.
And yeah, and recently over the last couple of years, I've really been expanding my sort of experience trying different types of scotch. I'm good friends with Jack Daniel, and Jack likes scotch, and he's introduced me to some great scotches. And we, when we can, we'll sit down, have a drink, and chat, and it's always nice.
I
Unfortunately,
love bourbon. Bourbon.
I don't know. Bourbon for me is just a little too sweet at times. I mean, there's certain bourbons that I do like, but I really like some of the Highlander kind of scotches and things.
There can be only one.
I can't do gin at all. I don't like pine trees.
Okay.
My buddy tried to give me one that had some floral hints to it. I was like, ooh, flowery pine tree.
Yes.
It may have just been the wrong kind of gin, but I was like, I need some juice because this isn't working.
It could have been Lysol. You never know.
Dude, probably.
I mean, it's been recommended, hasn't it?
That's funny. That's hilarious. So growing up, no cartoons. Gosh, no cartoons at all, no TV. What was your favorite radio show?
Oh boy. There was a show called Taxi that wasn't like the it was I think a spoof of the show Taxi here. And funnily enough, there was a guy by the name of Tony J who had a beautiful resonant voice, really, really deep voice. And he ended up moving to LA and started to do a lot of work in Los Angeles. Unfortunately, he's now gone, but got to meet him a couple of times and was like meeting one of my childhood heroes and idols.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But a lot of like detective shows and things like that. There was a show called Mark Saxon and Sergey, and they had this thing with a creaking door and all sorts of things that scared the hell out of us. But these are the kind of things that sort of formulated one's whole sort of worldview in a sense.
Wow.
Yeah. And how did you get into music? Because I know your mom was into music, but you're into music. I see the guitar, and I've heard you.
Yeah.
I've heard you singing.
I learned. In fact, my mother was originally born in Germany, and so one year we had gone to visit the country and met a cousin of hers who had a friend who taught me A, E, and D on the guitar. And I was, I think, about 11 or 12 years old, and I loved it. And so I just started playing and singing and, entertaining people at the university and stuff like that. And I love it. I find it a great sense of joy, and it really sort of, when you've had a stressful time, for me, it's almost a must. I mean, as you see, I've got a guitar here, I've got a few others, and I love to sometimes just during the day, just stop everything and just play a couple of songs.
Is that a gold top Les Paul behind you?
It's a tribute Les Paul. Yeah.
Gold top.
No.
It's hard to tell from this my monitor, but okay.
But I'm not a great guitarist, but I do enough to keep myself going, and I've been recording a little bit of music, and I collaborate with friends. There's a whole bunch of us in the VO community here who get together. We used to play every Saturday and have jam sessions and things like that. And it's just for fun, and it's great. Such a great outlet.
It's a very good way to release I say release the demons, but it's a good way to let things go and let them out.
I'm very impressed with your music. I really enjoyed listening to it. It's
Well, thank you.
very relaxing. It took me sort of into sort of like ethereal places. So I really did love that. Thank you for sharing that with me.
I love me some Steven. He helped me out with the track too. He's pretty dadgum super.
Well, I'll never forget, Jared, when we first met. It was at VO Atlanta, and it was karaoke. I think you were singing, and your daughter was there.
Yes, sir.
And I have to tell you, it touched me. I think I came up to you and I told you how wonderful it was.
Yes, sir. That's when we first met. Yes, sir.
Exactly.
It's meant the world to me too. That's how I always bring you up. I'm like, that's my first interaction. I was like such a gentle person. Like since I met you, like kicking it off right then, it was just so genuinely sincere about a sincere moment. So you're pretty special to me, Dennis.
Touched me.
Man, so much good. Always
so much good
memories. Let's say kind of the world went dark. Let's say all technologies, all power, and everything's gone.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, what kind of job do you think you would have? And second of all, what's something you could teach somebody during that time, you think?
Well, one other thing that you guys might not know about me is that I was a grief counselor for about 8 years as a volunteer.
Bless your heart.
And thank you. And very good friend of mine is involved with an organization in Los Angeles called Our House Grief Support. And I started working, they have an annual camp for children. And I started working as a camp counselor. And I was just fascinated by seeing how you deal with a subject that, quite frankly, is very taboo in our society. We don't talk about death. We don't use the right words for death. We try and sugarcoat everything. And I will never forget the first camp I did. And these kids are taught to look at death, to accept it, and not sugarcoat it. And when a 6-year-old turned around and said, "My mommy died of leukemia," and I realized that they were training these who sadly had a parent or sibling or whatever, close to them die, how valuable it is to sort of take that and really create a healthy relationship with grief. So I got involved and I started counseling adults, and I did that for about 4 or 5 years, and it was so meaningful. So if things went dark, I think I would want to get into doing something to help people, honestly. I'm fortunate to have, I think, quite good intuition about people and what's going on with them. So I think in my other life, I should have been a psychologist. I think that would have been a good profession for me, but I can play one.
That's a fantastic answer. I tell you, like coming from the grief, especially with close family members, it's something, you're right. It's more seen as a faux pas than anything, when really that person that's gone through it, they don't want to hear there's a reason for it. They don't want to hear all that. They just want someone to be there, to just be there in whatever capacity they need you, because everyone's different and everyone grieves in different ways.
In fact, a couple of months ago, Randy Thomas and I, with my friend Lauren Schneider, who is a director at Our House, we actually did a Zoom grief session for people in the VO industry who were dealing with, many different types of grief. Obviously, the big one is someone close to them dying, and with COVID going on and everything, there are a lot of people who are suffering terribly, but also the grief of missing the things that we take for granted, the normal life. And so we had the most amazing Zoom session, and I think we might do another one, just to give people a forum where they can talk a little bit and know that they are being listened to, they're being heard, and hopefully unburdening themselves.
Well, please let us know when you do that. We'd love to help put that out there. That's
I
very
always use
important.
the metaphor with people that I worked with, and what I would say to them is that you have all this inside, all this emotional turmoil going on inside. And if you don't give yourself an avenue to get it from inside to the outside, it stays there. and it festers, and it doesn't ever get handled, so yeah, it's an incredible organization in LA, and I'm sure there's plenty around the country, and I just feel that people really need to look at it for the reality that it is, because I think it helps them in the long term.
Awesome. I got one more I got a question that's kind of on the same kind of path, but you rule the world. You absolutely, whatever you say goes. What's your number one rule for humanity in the world? You doesn't matter. It can be anything.
Listen to each other, hear each other,
Ooh.
understand where people are coming from. Don't judge them for what they look like or what their beliefs are. Give them an opportunity to just share who they are as the individual and the fabulous individual that everybody is in this world, and stop finding ways to separate people. Find ways to bring people together.
I love that. I love that.
That's a great answer.
It's genuine too.
It is.
Yeah. Well, that's how I try and treat people. I look at people, and I really just, I want them to know that I care. You know, I'll tell you another story. Actually, have we got some more time? I don't know.
Please.
We're on Dennis time, baby. Go ahead.
So, growing up in South Africa, I had a friend who was in medical school, and when I was 19 years old, he said to me one day, he said, "Do you want to come into the?" He was doing anatomy, so they obviously had, the anatomy lab, and he said, "You want to come in and check it out?" I said, "Yeah, I would. I'd be very interested, actually." So we went in, and he introduced me to his guy, who he called Max, and
Max the cadaver.
right, exactly. Next to Max, there was a black man, and sadly, this man died pretty violently. You could see, the physical things, but in the anatomy lab, they are all at the same stage of dissection. And so I was looking around. I was very curious. And as I said, I already knew exactly where my future was going to be, and how I felt about what was going on in the country. But I looked at this man, the black man, lying next to the white man. And I looked at inside him, and everything looked exactly the same as the guy right next to him. And the only difference, quite frankly, other than, features, is the color of his skin, which I looked at and I realized is less than 1 millimeter in thickness. And what struck me is how this country that I was living in was basing its whole policies on something that was really less than 1 millimeter in thickness. It's so profound for me. And so, that's where I say, treat people for who they are as human beings, not what their skin tone is, what their belief systems is. Just, I don't know. That's where I'm at.
Well, there's shitty people in all walks of
Don't
life.
be
So,
an asshole.
That's the lesson right there. There's good people and bad people in all walks of life. So
Yeah.
you just got to find the good people.
Yeah. Exactly.
And where can people find you if they decided to look for you?
My website is aworldvoice.com.
A World Voice.
A World Voice.
I would agree with that.
Nice.
I was very lucky to get that. A little side story about that. As I was getting everything ready and prepared, in the days that I did play a little bit of golf, I don't do it that much anymore. But I was on the golf course with a couple of friends, and we were chatting, and all of a sudden this thing came to me, and I said, I wonder if aworldvoice.com is available. I'll never forget, I was on the 9th hole of a golf course not too far from me. I went online on my phone, went to GoDaddy, and I purchased the URL because it was available right there on the golf course.
Nice.
Best thing I've ever done for myself.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's right.
You got that one 2 under par.
You should have sold it to the highest bidder at that point. You're like, okay,
Right.
who wants it?
Right.
Is
Give me
there
some Bitcoin.
Is there a story that a story of struggle that you might want to share, that things, they go well for you, but there's a time where it didn't go well and you thought maybe it wasn't gonna continue?
Well, not so much in business. I mean, I think we've all had our challenges personally, and one of the biggest challenges for us in our family is that my daughter was born with a very severe congenital heart defect. And so, that's obviously defined a lot of our life. Thank goodness she's 100%. She's an incredible person and has done very well. But I think that was most probably one of the biggest challenges I've ever had to face, because when you have something like that, there's all sorts of things you have to look very realistically at. And as I said, things have turned out beautifully.
Yeah, that's great. I'm sure.
Man,
that
what you said just then.
She's developing as an artist now too, and it's just unbelievable just to see what she's producing. So.
That is literally one of the most helpless feelings in the world, is looking at your child, not knowing that everything is out of your hands, and to have that blind faith and you don't know where it comes from or anything. I just man, I can't even. You are right, sir.
Something interesting though about that whole thing, and that is that when we face these things, you always try to prepare as best as you can, surgery or this or that, out the window. But what I will say is that it all works out. You find your way, you find how to deal with it. It comes, and however you want to term it. I'm not a religious person per se, but I had the spiritual and inner strength that I could access, not knowing that I could access it prior to the time, but just doing it when I had to.
Amen to that. You never know till you know.
No, exactly.
No, that's very helpful.
I would say that's most probably one of the biggest hurdles, obstacles that I ever had to face in my life.
So other than your website, is there anywhere anyone can find you? Maybe anything that you're working on? You want to throw it out there? Whoop, whoop.
Well, I'm starting another Sherlock Holmes book fairly soon.
What?
Yeah, doing these like derivatives of Sherlock Holmes. I've done 2 trilogies already.
Very cool.
And it's a lot of fun. So that's something that's starting out soon. And
do you do voices when you do that?
Yeah, I'm just looking at next year as being a really monumental year for me and hopefully for all of us.
Do you do different voices when you read those? Like you do the different characters?
There's different accents. Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Ooh, I want to hear.
Me too.
So do you. So go out there and you find these books and you listen to my man. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I guess that does it for another episode of VO in Stereo. As always, I'd like to thank our very special guest for just really getting into the deeper side of what life has to offer with us. Thank you so much, Mr. Kleinman. Thank you. I really do appreciate it.
And a pleasure, Stephen. Wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you. And I look forward to seeing you guys next year in person. We can give each other a hug. We can have.
I'm gonna hug the shit out of you. Guaranteed.
You gotta be all
big
encompassed.
Bear hugs.
Virtual this and virtual that, right?
Well, guys, that does it. Another episode of VO in Stereo. I'm your host, Jared Breshers. Always with me,
Stephen Coghill.
Thanks again, Mr. Kleinman. Guys, we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye. Take care.